Good morning, class 11 students. Today we are going to begin a new chapter, and it is called The Address, and it is written by Marga Minko. Marga Mingo, she is a Dutch journalist, and she was born on 13 March 1920. She was born in an Orthodox Jewish family. Actually, her real name is Sarah Minko, but this is Marga Minko is her imaginative pseudonym name. So in this chapter, it is highlighted that as an individual, uh, what an individual has to go through during war and after war. So through the character Mrs. S and her daughter and Mrs. Darling, we see that how an individual suffers due to war and how there are some people who takes advantage of other even at the times of crisis. So this all can be seen through the characters that we have in this chapter, and the chapter also highlights a very important message that sometimes it is better not to dwell in the past, and it is better to move on and accept the life. So the chapter revolves around Mrs. S' daughter, and now she's looking for her mother's belonging. The belonging which they had given to Mrs. Darling at the first half of the Second World War, as the chapter was set in the days of Second World War, and we are all aware that what Jewish people had to suffer during the Second War in Holland, and Mrs. S and her daughter, they also faced the terrible circumstances. They were forced to leave and they were forced to run away and hide. So Mrs. S, in those time, Mrs. Darling, she happened to be an opportunistic woman, and she knew that she could take Mrs. S belongings, so she pretended to be their friend, and she herself insisted on keeping their things in her custody so that she could keep them safe. But on the contrary, the woman, she doesn't want to part of any of the belongings that she took from them. And now after the war, we see the girl returns to Holland, and now she is looking for Mrs. Darling, because she wants those belongings back, not because she's a materialistic child, but those belongings share a bond with her mother. So this is a short story, is a poignant. So poignant means something that evokes sadness. The story is a poignant account of a daughter who goes in a search of her mother's belonging after the war in Holland. This is what we have discussed just now. When she finds them, the objects evoke memories of earlier life. However, she decides to leave them all behind and resolves to move on, because those belongings and the possessions, right, which they handed over to Mrs. Darling, they are nothing but a source of pain and suffering, because it they those things kind of remind and evoke memories of her earlier life. That is why she decides to leave everything behind, and she moves on. So do you still know me? I asked. The woman looked at me searchingly. She had opened the door a chink. Chink means narrow opening. She opened the door half ajar. I came closer and stood on the step. No, I don't know you. I am Mrs. S' daughter. So this is how the chapter began. The daughter, she has finally reached at the address, and she knocks the door, and she isn't welcomed by the one who opens the door, and it's the woman. She looks at the daughter, Mrs. S' daughter, very carefully, and and she says that she doesn't know her, and that is why she takes her mother's name, because the woman the woman may not recognize the daughter's fate, but she will surely recognize her mother's name, as her mother and Mrs. Darling, they were good acquaintance. That is why the mother allowed Mrs. Dorling to take away all their belongings. But the woman we see in the woman is not ready to accept, is not ready to accept her existence because she says that she doesn't know. She held her hand on the door as though she wanted to prevent it opening any further, and the woman she kept her one hand on the door as if she was her preventing the daughter from entering inside. Her face gave absolutely no sign of recognition. She kept staring at me in silence. Recognition means acknowledgement. So, the narrator finds that the woman is completely unaware, and it seems that her face doesn't seem familiar to her. So perhaps I was mistaken. I thought perhaps it isn't uh, her. I had seen her only once, fleetingly. Fleetingly means for a short time. This is an adverb. That was years ago. It was most probable that I had rung the wrong bell. The woman let go of the door and stepped to the side. She was wearing my mother's green knitted cardigan. Cardigan means it is a hand knitted over jacket or a sweater. The wooden buttons were rather pale from washing. She saw that I was looking at the cardigan and half hid herself again behind the door, but I knew that I was right. So initially, the woman completely denied her existence, and she said that that she didn't recognize her, and the daughter thought maybe she was at the wrong address because she had come here after a long time after the war. So there were possibility that the daughter was wrong, or she must have arrived at the wrong address. And and also the fact that she didn't get to see her very often in those days. I think she saw Mrs. Darling in the first of the war. I mean, for like once or twice. So even she even Mrs. even the daughter is not sure, right, whether she is the Mrs. Darling or not. But then suddenly, when the woman appears, because she was hiding herself behind the door, when she appears in front of her completely, the girl noticed that Mrs. Darling was wearing her mother's knitted cardigan, and she at once realized that she saw that the wooden buttons they had worn out, right? And now she was sure, the one thing she was sure, and she was now confident enough that she was not at the wrong address, she was at the right address. Well, my mother, I asked, have you come back? And said the woman, I thought that no one had come back, only me. So children, this is very unwelcoming nature of Mrs. Darling, because yes, she willingly tried to deny her existence, although she knew that she was Mrs. S daughter, right? So now the daughter is sure because she knows that she is Mrs. Darling, and now Mrs. Darling also knows that the girl has seen her mother's cardigan. So now she is aware that she is at the right address, and she gave a very unwelcoming or a very disappointing reply to her, that she didn't expect that anybody would return, right? And the daughter said, only me. It means the mother passed long ago, and she is the only sole survivor. So can you imagine how difficult it is for the girl, for the daughter to to because she came back in order to talk to Mrs. Darling. But Mrs. Darling, I think Mrs. Darling is the only person whom she can confine into after war. But this woman, she's very unwelcoming, she's very insensitive, and she gave a very insensitive remark to her. So a door opened and closed in the passage behind her. A musty smell emerged. Musty smell, a damp smell or a stale smell. Emerged means to bring out. And then the door opened, and it closed in the passage. And this smell, this odor, right? I regret I cannot do anything for you. I have come here specially on the train. I wanted to talk to you for a moment. It is not convenient for me now, said the woman. I can't see you another time. And this woman, she straightforwardly told the daughter that she couldn't do anything for her. Even though she want, the daughter, she tried to tell her that she came all the way from the place where she lives to Holland, right? But the woman was not ready to listen, and she told her that it was not a convenient time for her. And she told, she gave her a very casual or very unwelcoming reply that she couldn't see her this time, and she said another time. And then she nodded and cautiously closed the door as though no one inside the house should be disturbed. And she carefully shut the door on her face as if she didn't want to disturb. She carefully closed the door as if she was trying. She was trying so that the some this is just a case, right? She closed the door so carefully as if she was trying not to disturb anybody who was inside her house. But this shows that the woman was so clever that she cautiously closed the door on her face. And the narrator: I stood where I was on the step. The curtain in front of the bay window moved. Someone stared at me and would then have asked what I wanted. Oh, nothing. The woman would have said it was nothing. And then now the narrator, she remains standing outside the door. The door is the door in front of her is closed. And suddenly in the nearby window somebody uncurtained and asked what this girl what she was looking for. And Mrs. Darling said it was nothing. I looked at the nameplate again. Darling, it said in black letters on white enamel, and on the jam is on the surface, enamel is a covering of paint. And the daughter, she was standing outside. She read the name again, the nameplate. It states Mrs. Darling and house number 46. So now the daughter is very, it is very because she received, she's so disappointed, right? And she's in despair and gloom, and she went back because the only person she knew in Holland now has denied her existence, right? So now she has decided to go back to the station whence she came from, right? So on the way back to the station, she experiences flashback, and she recalls a time when she got to know about Mrs. Darling and her address. So it had been, now children, this is the past, right? In the first half of the war, I was home for a few days. It struck me immediately that something or other about the rooms had changed. I missed various things, right? So this is now the past. The child is actually living in, she's experiencing flashbacks. She recalls a time, she had visited her home, right, after a long time. And there were a few things that she noticed. She found that some of the belongings, they had been taken away, right? And my mother was surprised I should have noticed so quickly. And it was very surprising for Mrs. S that her daughter, she has that she it was very easy for her to figure out that some of their belongings went missing. Then she told me about Mrs. Darling, and this is when she got to know about Mrs. Darling. I had never heard of her, but apparently she was an old acquaintance of my mother, whom she hadn't seen for years. She had suddenly turned up and renewed their contact. Since then, she had come regularly. So this woman, she was just an acquaintance, and she was not coming to their house, or she had not been coming to their house frequently until until that until the time after the when the war broke out. The woman paid them regular visit, and she tried to renew her friendship. And that is because this woman is very opportunistic. So every time she leaves here, she takes something home with her, said mother. She took all the table silver in one go, and the antique plates that hung there. She had trouble lugging those large vases, and I'm worried she got a crick means strain in her bag from the crockery. So this woman, every time she renewed her friendship, she gained the trust of Mrs. S. Mrs. S seems, she's very gullible, she's modest, she's sensitive, and she is very trustworthy. So Mrs. Darling, she was able to she was able to build build this trust. And then you know and after that, every time she would visit their house, she would take something with her. So first she took all the silver crockery, and then she took all the antique plates, and she also developed a sprain or on her bag when she was dragging those large vases, right? So it means the woman did not leave anything behind. She took everything from them. And why is she taking everything from them? That is because they are Jewish people and they cannot take those belongings, and she was well aware of it. That is why she is taking advantage of their misfortune or of the situation, right? So my mother shook her head pityingly, and this lines highlights that mother is very sensitive. She is actually sympathizing with Mrs. S, who sprained her back. I would never have dared ask her. She suggested it to me herself. She even insisted she want to save all my nice things. If we have to leave here, we shall lose everything, she says. Have you agreed with her that she should keep everything? I asked. So the mother told the daughter that she never told Mrs. Darling to take away all those things. She told her daughter that it was Mrs. Darling who insisted, and she said that she would take care of all those things. She would take everything. So the child asked her mother that you know she asked her mother whether she agreed to this or not. And as if that's necessary, my mother cried. It would be simply be an insult to talk like that, and think about the risk she's running each time she goes out for our door with a full suitcase of bags. So according to mother, it will be very impolite to ask her that she would keep everything, right? Or would she take everything from their house? Because according to Mrs. S, Mrs. Darling is a nice woman, but she's actually not. And she Mrs. S thinks that she's actually risking her life in order to prevent their belongings and possessions. But actually, Mrs. Darling, she is not thinking about them. She is not thinking about anything. She's just thinking about how she can benefit herself from the situation, right? My mother seemed to notice that I was not entirely convinced. She looked at me reprovingly means criticizingly. After that, we spoke no more about it. But the daughter, was not at all convinced, and the mother criticized the daughter that she should not doubt Mrs. Darling. Meanwhile, I had arrived at the station without having paid much attention to things on the way. I was walking in familiar places again for the first time since the war, but I did not want to go further than was necessary. I didn't want to upset myself with the sight of streets, house full of memories from a precious time. And now, because this is, the previous, the portion which we have just read, right? The above portion, it was just when she was recalling the past time, that how she got to know about Mrs. Darling and her address. And in present, she finds that she has reached the station, and she hasn't even paid attention to her surrounding. The surrounding is very familiar because she had spent a lot of time in Holland, right, during the time of war. And but she doesn't want to go any further. She doesn't want to experience or observe the familiar things, but because it would give her the familiar sight would give her pain. Because memories are not always good. Sometimes memories also give pain, right? So if she thinks about that precious time, obviously she thinks about her mother, right? And her mother is no longer in existence. That is because of war, that is because of Nazi party, and that is because of the cruelty of people around us. So she doesn't want to think about them. So that's all for today's session, children. We will be picking up the next portion in the next video. Thank you.